And welcome back to Jeff Koinange Live. Much anticipated interview here with Dr. Mukhisa Kituyi, Kenya's highest ranking official in the United Nations system. He's also former Minister of Trade in the Kibaki administration. Dr. Hari, good to see you as always.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to Kenya. I know you're always traveling in and out of the region, so it's good to catch up with you. And I know you've been keeping an eye on Kenya. Wherever you are, you keep an eye on Kenya. And I'm sure you, like us, shake your head every time you hear there's another scandal. This country is just littered with one scandal after another, Dr. Hari. What are people out there saying? You have a great vantage point where you sit in Geneva.
Right. Thank you very much for this opportunity. But first of all, I know that you are drowning in limitless exposures of new scandals in this country. But first thing that the world thinks about Kenya is that Kenya works. I mean, there are so many positives about Kenya that in spite of yourselves, you get some fairly positive image across the world. The home of M-Pesa, the home of the great athletes, the home of very, very enterprising people both at home and abroad, the gift of geographic location, climate and everything. Kenya is exciting. And so the challenge becomes, but why do these guys go out of their way to do stupid things when they are so blessed? But a fundamental thing is this: the people of Kenya should not get an overload of corruption scandals. You can get to a point where you become, immune to shock. That it is so normal, it's so common, we're unraveling, everything new coming every day, that you start switching off. You don't show any shock and abhorrence. That is the moment that you lose it. The ability to be outraged, the desire to punish, the desire to find where is it that it started raining upon us should be sustained and nurtured by all of you.
And yet, Dr. Hari, no one has been punished for all this stealing. It's beyond corruption now. This outright stealing that's going on. Nobody's being punished.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't live here. But my sense is some people have been punished, but it's a tap on the wrist. I hope that you make the cost of corruption so high that nobody else will be tempted to get into it. That proper punishment start coming through. It will be very, very good for this country if the world starts seeing real big thieves paying for it. Losing what they got through theft, losing the convenience going to jail. That's how other countries have dealt with corruption. Even European countries, American places have corrupt people. But the punishment when you're caught is so high that the temptation to go in, you think twice before you go there. But as a country, there's another thing that you have to see. Why has it become so mainstream?
You mean corruption?
Corruption in Kenya. At one level, you have to understand that you are a country which has heroized wealth regardless of how you got it. I was attending a funeral in Busia a week ago, and I shared this before an Anglican preacher man. I said, you are a country where a public person who is known to be stealing taxpayers' money comes to church and makes a donation of 5 million shillings. And the priest asks people to bend, go down to their knees and pray to God. Thank you God, Mungu Baba, tukushukuru sana vile ulitutunukia mgeni, mwenyewe ulibuleta akatusaidia. Mungu, fungua njia zake ziwe bana. Mungu, wewe mwenyewe unajua pahali alizitoa hizi. Muongezee uwezo atoe uko zaidi ili atusaidie zaidi. You are asking God to help him double the stealing. I don't know what God feels about you when you use a preacher man to do this kind of thing. You are mainstreaming thieving. And you're even asking God to help thieves steal more. You must have a certain set of norms as a country which are other than glorifying wealth. There are children, there are young men and women who are having major depression because you have set a high premium on monetary gain. When they do things the right way and they're not becoming millionaires, they feel that there's a failure about them. But there is no society which moved that way. I have had the privilege to go to many countries. I've never seen a model of a country which became developed because everybody tried to steal from everybody else.
Tell me something. What was it like under Kibaki's administration, which you worked in as a Minister of Trade?
There was one or two major scandals.
Yeah.
One was ongoing and another one was new. That the spills of Goldenberg were not totally over. But also that Anglo-leasing, some Anglo-leasing people took advantage of the time the president was in a bad health place, that he was not available to be in daily charge of things, and they rushed in a period of 3 months. They did 3/4 of the stealing that was done throughout the period that I was in government. But having said that, there were systems in government. You could not have a case where 20 billion shillings could be paid to a contractor without any job being done. And what is happening to the prefecting of public resources? Where is that role from Treasury? Where is that role from other arms of government? Where is the responsibility of accounting officers in ministries? When you get a person who just walks around with public money in sacks, and you say, hey, has there been a collapse of state? Somebody just broke into a bank and stole money? Or some accounting officers issued orders, authorized payments? And don't get tired asking these things. Because others who have been that low got out of it by asking these things. But there's something else they did. Look at Korea, South Korea. The president took his son to jail. And since that time, virtually every other president in Korea has ended up in jail, including the immediate past president. She is in jail.
Correct, correct.
There should be no untouchables. And you as a country must ride out the notion that there are some people who have an ethnic entitlement to bad manners, that will just start beating the drums of war and say our tribe is being targeted, and then the rest of you back off. The tribe of Kenya is bleeding. Young men and women without employment, 5 years, 10 years, tammacking since university, because the business sector is shrinking, because manufacturing is in decline, because we're paying a high price to corruption. This is not a model of how to revive and grow the most promising country economically in the region.
Yeah, and Dr. You're good friends with the president. You meet him every time you can, and you hold great sessions with him. And he's not running again in 22. He has no reason to campaign. He's got this agenda of his that he wants to create, and a legacy as well. And yet, everyone's waiting for that moment. When is he going to crack that whip?
I don't think that I can tell that. And also, any confidential conversation I have with the president, I cannot take it to a media meeting. But it's suffice to say the following. I have held a position that President Uhuru Kenyatta does not need any other legacy than to drive corruption out of the mainstream of Kenyan public life. Even if he does not succeed on most of the 4 pillars, which I hope he lays a foundation that the next government will carry on. His greatest legacy will be to leave State House when nobody will be having people applauding and dancing for him on the basis of money stolen from the Kenyan taxpayers, when it is too expensive to steal from the public. I have been arguing for position. I work for the United Nations who are opposed to the death penalty. But certain levels of crimes against society should tempt one for the ultimate penalty. But I think a life sentence will do.
Yeah. And some big fishes.
In countries, big fishes, former presidents are rotting away in jail because of corruption. Why should we pussyfoot when we're dealing with thieves in our own country? We need that money more than those countries that are showing outrage at corruption. The Prime Minister of Israel, the longest serving Prime Minister in the history of Israel, is right now on the brink of a serious trial about corruption. Nobody has said that Israel is against the family of Netanyahu. Kenya should institutionalize, depersonalize, consistently emphasize that the best in us is a steady fight against corruption, expunge this criminality from public leadership.
Dr. You know what boggles my mind is that 1 billion shillings seems like nothing to these people anymore. 21 billion shillings disappeared in the building of a dam that was never built. And we were told that only 7 billion disappeared. Only 7 billion. That's shocking.
Well, that is your political culture as a country. You know, some people may not have noticed that if you compute the entire allocation of money for building dams, you know it's more than the money for SGR.
Sure.
And you've been saying SGR is not bringing enough money to service the debt.
Yeah.
But none of these dams is bringing any money.
At all.
But this economy cannot afford that while creating jobs for the millions of young men and women coming out of education institutions. We celebrate the success in education, but they need to deliver bread to their families at the end of the day. Families sold land to send their children to school, hoping that the economy will grow and give them a livelihood, to affirm that education is good for them. But if the resources that should go to this is drained into the pockets of individuals, those are serious crimes against the society.
Is it going to reach a breaking point if nothing is done, Dr. Ari?
I hope you don't get to that point. The experiment is too dire to imagine. But there's something you should understand. From the Weimar Republic of Germany in the 1930s, a major historical lesson was learned that democracy is at its most vulnerable when parents believe that the next generation will have poorer lives than themselves. If children are poorer than their parents, and the parents are poorer than their parents, that is very, very difficult condition to nurture democracy. The collapse of 3/4 of democratic governments in Europe during the Great Depression precipitated the Great War. Democracy in Kenya is necessary, but it cannot be nurtured unless we do all that it takes to start turning around the economy. You cannot turn it around without taming the monster of corruption.
You were talking about our goodwill outside of Kenya and the way people perceive Kenya a moment ago, Doctor.
Yeah.
Are we losing that goodwill?
Not yet totally. I've just come out of an extended tour of the Caribbean, and most prime ministers I met actually lionize Kenya. They like Kenya very much. There are some who are very bold, like Barbados is opening its first embassies in Africa ever. There are 2, and one of them is likely to be in Nairobi. I saw the Prime Minister of Jamaica talking so warmly about building a working relationship with the government and the people of Kenya. And even in Europe, I mean, very many times people say, look, without sufficient government support, there are digital lions and lionesses that are emerging in Kenya. Young men and women who do not ask what government will do for them. Yeah. Who are saying government should not make it difficult for us to do what we're capable of doing. They are creating jobs. They are on the frontier of technology. They are looking at how to create market visibility for the rural producers. What they need is a little assistance with infrastructure, with a political culture that says we reward enterprise and we punish thieves. And the world can appreciate you on that.
The famous handshake is about a year old now, Doctor. You know that very well. And obviously peace has prevailed for now. First of all, your thoughts about the handshake so far?
I have expressed my views to both President Kenyatta and Right Honorable Raila Odinga that I think it was a very honorable thing for them to ease tensions in Kenya, and that anything that can be done to cure the toxic ethnic distrust and standoff that characterized the period, particularly after the first round of the presidential election, must be done. Kenya cannot afford to create conditions that scare away foreign investors. You need them now more than ever before. And neighbors like Ethiopia are pulling in some of the investors that should be looking at Kenya as well. But having said that, there is something that I have not been quite comfortable with. I see there are certain things that need to be changed in the Constitution of Kenya. And for many of them to change, you will need a referendum. I will not do a campaign telling people we want a referendum. I'll do a campaign saying we want to cure certain problems in the constitution. You don't sell the method before you have decided on the product. So develop the product first. That is one. Secondly, for a country that is struggling with a large public debt, with rising unemployment, with a substantially large number of young men and women without jobs and coming into the labor market, the logic of constitutional reform should be partly to reduce the public bill. The cost of Kenyan democracy is too high. But the narrative I hear is we want to change the constitution so that we have more representation, as many areas as possible represented in government. That logic does not bear out the economic conditions in which we are. It is good to have a system that gives inclusion, but to overemphasize creating offices so that as many people as possible see themselves represented at a high level in government should not be the raison d'etre of changing the constitution. It should be, can we be governed more efficiently, effectively? Can we plug the routes that have been used by the billionaire governors to rein in the abuse of devolution? A good thing being done, a bad turn? Can we reduce the number of representatives? Where I sit, it embarrasses me how many MCAs and MPs come to Geneva officially on some UN business, but they don't go to any of the meetings, and they draw a per diem of $1,000 per day.
Per day?
My colleagues from the UN from other stations coming to Geneva get $400 per day at my level. And Kenyan MPs get $1,000 every day.
And they don't attend the conferences?
They don't. They commandeer a minibus from the Kenyan embassy to go to be tourists and to go and stay in cheap hotels on the French side of the border, sometimes 30 kilometers away from town.
So that they could have more money for shopping?
Yeah. You are not going to rein in the public bill unless some of these excesses are reined in. And there has to be a conversation. Giving the parliament the power to preside over budgetary affairs was a cure of the abuses and excesses of the Moi years, when budgeting was an instrument to control, to reward friends and punish enemies. But that cure was not to give atavistic power to parliament to allocate a disproportionate part of public resources for the travel of MPs. And it's not just MPs. I've seen a case where a governor from Kenya flies to Shanghai, and he flies first class, and is flying with an aide who also flies first class.
What?
And that's taxpayers' money.
Correct.
So the conversation should not just be about more inclusion. More inclusion is not more positions. The structure of how we use what is available is part of the challenge. It's not just perpetual creation of more jobs for the boys and distributing them to tribal kings so that everybody has something in their territory. That logic does not belong to the Kenya of the 21st century.
But there are some people who say that handshake, or they feel sidelined from the handshake.
I mean, those are internal to politics. I have personal opinions, but I have no right to wade into that space at this time. I'm soon coming to the end of my tenure at the UN. When I do, I will express very publicly, very clearly, my sense on some of those contentious specific issues. But at this stage, I'll just say, we in the UN are looking for success stories from the developing world. We in the UN want to support models of governments that rose to the challenge, seized the opportunities, unlocked the potential of their entrepreneurs and their thinkers. And we don't see any reason why Kenya should not be in the forefront of this. And very many think that you're already almost in that forefront. Don't hold it back because of petty appetites. Don't hold it back because of trying to score points. The desire to say this one is right and this is wrong may be okay in the petty competition. But for some of us, it is not good enough.
Do you wish you were on this side looking in rather than on the outside looking in?
I am very happy that I'm where I am. I think it has been a privilege to serve in that position. I think as the first Kenyan Under Secretary General of the United Nations, I've not just placed the name of the nation on the global map, but I've acquitted myself pretty well so far. And I have absolutely no regrets for taking that position. And I'm definitely not wanting to be in government now. As to what happens when I leave the UN, that's a different matter.
What if you were offered something, you know, for argument's sake?
I know where you are headed to. I will say the following. Number one of the most important responsibilities of the head of the organization that I lead is to host a major conference every 4 years. The last one I hosted in Nairobi in 2016, UNCTAD 14. Next year is the year of UNCTAD 15. I have a solemn responsibility to steer the organization through that conference. I have set up a major international panel of eminent people to advise me, including 4 sitting presidents and some leading captains of enterprise. I want to see that through as I help to define the global trajectory of how to support developing countries over the next 10 years. That's a responsibility I cannot walk away from. As I'm in the middle of it, I have to execute it. So nothing will deter me from that.
That's good. That's good. It shows at least you're concentrating on what you're doing. But once in a while, when you throw your eye towards Kenya, do you shake your head and say, what are you people doing?
I do, and I don't just shake my head. I talk to government leaders. I talk to business leaders in this country. We are not children of a lesser God. We deserve better than we're doing. There are very many great things being done in this country, but they get submerged in this sea of mediocrity. This is our lowest point. We always believe that you get to work hard and you have a fair payment for your hard work. Yeah. But to get junior clerks buying mansions in the developing areas and boasting about it on social media, those are not the face of the Kenya that I wanted to believe that I come from. But we can tame it. First of all, don't relent in the crusade against corruption. There will be petty noises. Don't let those noises scare you. It's a right thing to do as a country. Secondly, diminish the over-celebration of material display of wealth. There are countries with a lot of rich people. They don't do this thing that you worship them like you are national heroes. The national heroes of this country, people like Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Wangari Maathai, Elijah Odine Msambwa, they did not steal from the public to be celebrated. They put forward their better foot, the shape of what Kenya is capable of presenting to the world. Let us start celebrating those heroes. Let us start encouraging the Wangari Maathais that are being stifled because of the absence of infrastructure for education, for health, and the respect of integrity.
You know, a lot of people are probably watching you tonight, Doctor, and saying, my goodness, I wish this person was here helping us fight this fight.
There are very many people like Kituyi in this country. I just think that you are not creating enough space to listen to them. I just think that you are listening much more to the political intrigues than to the substantive challenges before the nation. But most importantly, leadership can raise the voice that we are not children of a lesser God. And there are enough followers in this country who say we were almost giving up, we were losing hope. But we need that stretched hand to help us stand up and say the Kenya that our forebears shed blood to liberate is the Kenya that should stand proud in the community of nations. And you can't do that when you steal from the public, you get scot-free, and you're even tempted to be rewarded with more power because of what you have stolen. That is not the route to go.
Do you think the day will come when we will be able to call a thief a thief? Do you think that day will come?
I think in many ways you have started doing that. You started doing that. And friends of Kenya encourage you. Friends of all the developing countries encourage people that you cannot conquer the demons of backwardness unless you stigmatize stealing from the public. You punish abuse of the privilege of high office, the privilege to serve. And you start recognizing and rewarding those lowly persons who are doing a good job, those teachers who are spending extra hours to see the kids in the disadvantaged schools also score and competitively enter good schools, get to good degrees. Those who sleep but stand up and walk again. You will make it. Kenya can make it. Kenya has no right not to succeed.
I think it was Brazil Musumba who had sent a tweet earlier on saying, ask Dr. Kituyi, is what you fought for in 1992, and you were part of the second liberation, what you fought for, multi-party democracy, a better Kenya. Are you disappointed when you look at Kenya today from what you fought for?
You know, I've been thinking, I've been writing some parts of what might be my memoirs, and one of the defining things was this. If you look at what we're doing in the fight for multipartyism, it was not just to have multiparty. It was a progressive agenda of national renewal, comprehensive agenda of the purpose for getting power. What has happened in the years since, political competition has moved from the purpose for which you want power to the tactics by which you can get power. So you say this team will win because they are bringing together people from large tribes or they have a large war chest. It's a tactic of winning power. It's not the purpose of controlling high office. And until and unless this country starts again to say, let us find the rationale for allocating power to be what you want to do with it, not what resources you have to buy that power. If that conversation comes back, there's a lot of millennials, there's a lot of young men and women who are going to use their resources to work and say, it's our window of renewing our country. My generation tried a bit, but through succession, some even morphed into now power games of looking at just the arithmetics of getting power and not the purpose of seeking high office for a liberative role to the society. Most importantly, to give a livelihood to the next generation of Kenyans who today are in severe existential challenges because of a stalling labor market. Yeah.
And those crimes of the past that were committed during your time,
yes,
should the perpetrators be punished?
I believe that the best way to end crime is to make it not pay. And I believe crimes from my time to crimes to today should be punished in equal measure. If there is any political consideration about the extent of how much you punish without looking like it is a vengeance, that's a discussion that can be looked into. But to me, the best way to dish it out is that vengeance should be equal to all crimes. You can't say the crime of yesterday is less severe than the crime of tomorrow. We are seeing Manafort, the former chairman of President Trump's campaign, going to jail for most of his remaining years for crimes of not declaring income many years ago. Yeah. Why can't we see that in spite of certain things that we may say about that government, it presides in a system which is impersonal and the crime is punished?
And not far away, Jacob Zuma facing trial.
Yes, yes.
So it can happen.
It should happen.
Kabando wa Kabando, he says, Dr. Kituyi is a rare breed, politically suave, intellectually insightful, instinctively eloquent, brilliant brain, brutally effective, unapologetically focused. And then he goes on to say the UN should loan us Kituyi for a little while so that the president can deal with all this noise that's happening.
We work with the Kenya government. Thank you, Kabando Mheshimiwa, for those generous words. The UN is working with the Kenya government. They are very efficient, effective UN officers in this country. Next week, I'm opening, together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the University of Nairobi, I'm opening for the first time a government economists training program for Africa, which we've been running for the last 10 years out of Mauritius. We are now opening it in Nairobi, hopefully for the next 10 years. And we start on Monday next week.
Wow.
This is an area where our best brains as a UN organization, together with brains from other UN agencies, are coming to assist government and other governments from the region about what are best practices. How can we move forward? How can we refuse to be detained by petty appetites? And this is the way to go about it.
Unbelievable. Great discussion here, and we're going to take a break, come back, so much more to discuss ahead. We're going to take your tweets, your comments to Dr.Mukhisa Kituyi. What a brain. I'm glad we had him on tonight because, you know, we need this kind of conversation. We need it. And he says, let's keep talking. Keep making noise about the thieves out there. Maybe one day somebody might just hear. We're going to take a quick break, come back, so much more ahead. Richard Kimenyi says, great conversation. He says, you're an outstanding man. Jackie Muhati from Kenya Airways. She says her boss, Sebastian Mikosh, says you're invited to Kenya Airways launch on June 12th in Geneva. They're flying their first flight. Nairobi, Rome, Geneva. First flight. They want you there.
They're inviting me through Jeff Koinan?
No. They're trying to get in touch with you, but they've just seen you on TV. So, okay, I'll give them your contacts and you can talk.
Okay, thank you.
Goodness, what a man. Dr. Mukhisa Kituyi. This is the kind of conversation we need to have, and we're having it. We're going to take a break, come back. Plenty more. Stay with us. Jeff Koinan Live. We'll be back in a moment.